Hello everyone and welcome to another really great game from round 1 of the Tata Steel 2021 between Anish, Giri and the other Norwegian in the tournament, Grandmaster Aryan Tari. It's quite a lovely game and I'm sure you're going to enjoy it, so let's dive straight into it. So Giri, with the white pieces, opens with e4. We have e5 by Tari, sorry about that. And knight to f3 by Giri. So knight f3, knight to c6, and bishop to b5. Giri goes for the Ruy Lopez. Knight f6, we have the Berlin defense, pretty much the only thing anyone plays nowadays against the Ruy Lopez in top-tier tournaments. d3, and now bishop to c5. We have bishop captures on c6, d captures, and now Giri castle. So this is all been seen plenty of times. We have bishop to g4 and now h3, kicking back Tari's bishop. We have bishop to h5, and now it's a very interesting position. For example, Firuzja had it against Magnus Carlsen in last year's St. Louis Blitz tournament, where knight b to d2 was played. Carlsen was able to win this with the black pieces, but here we have a very daring g4. And now it's very interesting. What do you do here? Do you retreat with the bishop to g6, or do you capture on g4 maybe with the bishop or maybe with the knight? So this position has been reached before, so this is not a new move, but it is a very tricky one. And one very important piece of information is that in top-tier games, black never won this position. So it's very interesting that Tari goes against someone like Anish Giri, who is, I think, probably the most prepared grandmaster in the world. I don't know the extent of, for example, Carlsen's or Dubov's preparation, but I would guess Giri is, really among the absolute most prepared. So here he goes and accepts the challenge. Knight captures on g4. You want to keep the bishop so you can continue pinning the knight. H captures. We have bishop captures on g4, and now already a very critical position, so to say. Not really a critical position, but it is a very important one. So basically, the two moves that you consider here are bishop to e3. You already grabbed the piece. Do you want to trade more, or king to g2? Now, king to g2 is something that most players usually play. You want to make room for that rook. You want to get the rook into the game, but it's already very dangerous. For example, if black castles and you now go bishop to e3, now black just busts open the position with f5, and you're going to have a very difficult game to play. So white will now be on the defensive for the rest of the game, and even if you grab a piece here, then it's just game over on the spot. Pawn captures, and there is no defense here. So many pieces are attacking the knight here. White's going to lose the queen, and there's not much to be done. Even with perfect play, which I'm going to show as it's very interesting, you can capture on e4. Black can actually trade queens here first. Captures, bishop captures with check, and now king has to move. You're going to capture on f1. White will capture on f8, and now you're going to capture back here. And even if you don't go into any more complications, it's just a winning endgame. Black is up 2 pawns, so easily winning. So after bishop captures on g4, you have to be careful. Like there are some choices, but Giri goes for the absolute best one, which is bishop to e3. And now black, of course, didn't castle just yet, so maybe f5 would be a bit too ambitious. So here, bishop back to e7. Tari wants to keep, of course, as many pieces on the board now. He sacrificed material for the attack, and only now king to g2 by Giri. And f5, immediately striking in the center and trying to open up the f-file for attacking the king. We have queen to e1, immediately getting the queen out of the way, so now the knight can move. And now bishop captures on f3. We have king captures on f3, and now look at this beautiful king here. He's quite the adventurer. And now, what do you do here? You don't wanna capture here. Capturing doesn't really do all that much. So what do you do here? Here, black tries to keep the pressure on the board by playing f4. Now he kind of numbs down the power of this dark square bishop, and he wants to play g5, h4, g4 next, and continue the attack on the white king. So Giri has to go back, bishop d2, and now g5. And here Giri just switches the bishop to c3, now putting it on a very nice diagonal, attacking the pawn here on e5. And now here bishop to f6. Tari just defends it, but if you're playing a position like this, you always have to check moves like g4. Does it work? Do you get anything by opening up the g file? because it's very interesting. For example, king captures, rook g8 check, now king back to f3, only move that doesn't lose. And now how do you continue the attack? For example, queen d7 threatening checkmate, but then white survives after king to e2, and now the king will find safety. For example, check, king can go, king to d2, and now white is just up too much material, and the white will win the game. But it is very interesting, and my point is you should always check moves like these. So bishop to f6, Tari defends the e5 pawn, and now knight to d2. Giri continues developing. We have queen to e7, adding another defender here. At some point, this knight is coming to c4, gonna attack the e5 pawn once again. And now rook to h1. We have h5 by Tari, and now king back to e2. Want to start running away with the king. g4 looks very scary, and now f3 by Giri. That's why king to e2. Now he can play f3, and black definitely doesn't want to capture here because this is just a perfectly fine position for white. So instead, after f3, Tari continues pushing. We have g3 now creates a very strong pass pawn here, but Giri doesn't mind. King to f1, and now Giri will put his king on g2, put his rook on h3. Black does not have a light square bishop, and he will create a very nice blockade here on the king's side. And the black will have a very hard time breaking through this. So h4, and now rook to h3. You do not want to allow h3, then it's all black. So rook to h3, a must move, and now comes a5. Here again, you need to check g2. Just maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but you need to check what's happening after rook g8 check, king h1. It doesn't seem like black has that many options, but always check. So here a5. Now, of course, going for b5 and further expansion, but Giri immediately goes a4. He wants to place this knight on c4, and he wants the b5 square defended, so the knight cannot be kicked away, just like that. So b6, and now king to g2. We have c5 by Tari, and now queen to b1. Now you can play b3, you can bring the queen here, and then the queen, the bishop, and the knight will all be attacking the e5 pawn. So here, king to f7. Tari needs to play some moves, but there aren't all that many moves to play here. And it's although it seems like it's black who's attacking here, it's actually white who's attacking here, because black has these two weaknesses, the e5 pawn and the h4 pawn, and it's going to be extremely difficult to defend all of them. So b3, rook 8 to d8, and now knight to c4. So a second attacker joins the attack. We have king to g6, and now queen to b2. Now a third attacker joins the party, so now you have to defend it. Rook to h5. This is how Tari defends the pawn. Rook 8 to h1 now, with more pressure on the h4 pawn. For the moment, it's sufficiently defended, so it's not a problem. Rook d to h8, adding another defender, and here queen back to a1 by Giri. We have king to g7, now bishop back to b2. King to g6, and now queen to b1. A little bit of maneuvering, placing the queen on the same diagonal as the king, so now maybe c3 and d4 will be possible here, but Tari says, no, not a problem, we're just going to go rook to d8, and now we add additional protection to the d4 square, and also I'm going to move my king on the next move, so you don't have to worry about this. So queen to e1 by Giri, now switching the queen over to the c3 square, and then he's going to move the knight and try to wiggle his queen into the position like this. So it's quite the plan. Rook king to g7, and now queen back to a1. Here we have rook d to h8. Tari just has to wait and see what Giri will do. And now Giri starts remaneuvering with the knight. Knight to a3. And now you can go to b5, you can go to c3, you can even go to d5 if you like. You can go to e2 if you need it for some reason. We'll see what happens. So king to g6, and now knight to b5. Tari has no option here but to wait and see what Giri will do. Bishop to g7, and now knight back to c3. We have queen to d8, and now not knight to d5, although it is a nice square for the knight. Instead, Giri goes knight to e2. And here already you can see that there might be some tricks here. Queen and bishop here on this long diagonal. Maybe knight f4 will be an idea. If pawn captures, then you might completely get your position destroyed. So here, rook 8 to h7, adding a defender to the bishop here. And now queen to e1. Now that Giri achieved this, now he's going to try and make way for his queen to enter black's position. Queen to d6, and now queen to c3. we have c6 by black, and now queen to c4. So keeping an eye on that b5 square, also preparing queen a6. And here we have rook back to h8. Again, it's very hard for black to make a move here. For example, if you try something like, let's say, bishop to f6, then you allow queen to g8 check. And this is something you don't want to allow, because after king to g7, now queen to e8 check, you have to block this, otherwise you might lose the rook. So let's say rook to f7, and now rook captures on h4. Very, very tricky stuff. Rook captures, bishop captures, and now the very nice knight captures on f4, and that's just it for black. E captures, queen g8 check, the bishop covers this square, so you cannot block. King h6, queen captures, and now black is just completely busted. Very tricky to find a move here for black. Tari goes back, rook to h8, and now bishop to a3, aligning the bishop with the queen, so d4 is the idea here. Tari moves the queen, queen to f6, and now finally queen to a6, going after that pawn. So Tari defends it, rook to b8, and now bishop to c1. Again, a lot of pressure on that f4 pawn. You need to do something about that. So Tari defends it, bishop to h6. Now queen to a7, attacking the rook. If you move the rook, again, you're going to start losing the pawns on the queen side. And since the king side is completely locked down, there's nothing to be pushed there. If you lose the queen side pawns, it's game over. So queen to d8, keeping an eye on the rook, and now bishop back to b2. Again, trying to overload black's defenses. For now, everything is defended, but now there are 3 weaknesses for black to worry about, and more often than not, 2 are enough, 3 are just impossible to hold. So queen to c8, and now comes queen to e7. You don't really have a move here. Like this is a I don't know if it's officially a Zugzwang, but the black really does not have any moves here. So here, queen to c8 by Tari, and now Giri goes queen to e7. And this is almost the position from the thumbnail. If you don't do this, for example, if you try something like rook captures on h4, rook captures on h4, and rook captures on h4, rook to b7. White is still, of course, winning, but black manages to kick away the white queen, and it's going to be you will have to grind a little bit more with white. So here Giri instead goes queen to e7. He doesn't allow his queen to be kicked away from the 7th rank, and now bishop to f8. So why did Giri allow bishop to f8 and get his queen trapped? Because the queen has nowhere to go. All of these squares are covered. You could go back all the way back to a7, but if you go queen to a7, then rook to a8, and then again, what do you do here? Again, none of the squares are available now to the white queen, and you're just gonna have to give it up. But it's still a very interesting position, so I will show it. For example, white can go bishop captures on e5 here, and after the queen is captured, now knight captures on f4 with check, connects with the rook, and after the king moves, knight captures here on h5, and it's just a complete madness of a position. But it's in fact white who's still better here. But it doesn't matter, because after this bishop to f8 move, Giri has actually a forced checkmate in 7. So feel free to pause the video and win this game for Giri while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting the absolute best idea. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's knight captures on f4 with check. So immediately go for this. This is what Giri played, and it was in this position that Aryan Tari resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. Why can't you do anything? Well, let's explore what happens if you capture the knight. If you capture the knight, then you've opened up this diagonal, and then it's just over. There are actually 2 winning moves here. Queen to f6 is winning, but the much nicer rook captures on g3 is more beautiful. So we're gonna see why this is more beautiful. If h-pawn captures, then you just go queen f6 check, and now you opened up the h file for the rook. King h7, rook captures, king here, and of course rook to h8 is checkmate. So why don't you capture with the f-pawn, you might ask? Well, this also is possible, but then you free up this diagonal for the bishop, and this is the good stuff. Queen f6 check, king has to move, king h7, queen f7, you're gonna go king h6, and now bishop to c1 with check. And there are no moves for the black king. Rook to g5, and now rook captures here is checkmate. The rook is pinned, and nothing can move here. and just awesome stuff. So what you could do after this knight captures on f4 that ended the game is ignore it. You could just move the king to h6, but it's not much better. Queen f6 check, king to h7, and now queen g6 check is possible because the knight guards it. King to h8, and now bishop captures on e5. An excellent finish. Rook captures, and now rook captures on h4. And now once you give everything up along the h file, it's just this very nice checkmate. So everything came down to this knight captures on f4 move, which is one of my favorite moves. Knight captures on f4 because you know that game 6 Botvinnik versus Stahl, really a nice one. Even though that was a black knight capturing on f4, but still, you know, it's knight f4. But yeah, another nice game from round 1, and the winners after the first round were Grandelius, Giri, and Carlsen, who are now officially leading the tournament after round 1, but we're not going to be showing the table because it's only round 1. We're going to show it maybe after the third round. So yeah, that's the game. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Really awesome stuff by Giri. And here you can see that what happens, it was actually Tari who thought he was attacking, but it was actually Giri who was attacking once the king side completely closed up. It was actually White who was attacking all along. But yeah, great stuff from Tari for going for such a wild attack against Giri. I hope he continues playing such games because those are the games that we most enjoy seeing. So yeah, I would like to thank Andrea Quirini, Olson Hissa, Tiziano Ongaro, Denny Rokoch, and Justin Brockhouse for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Tata Steel 2021, checking up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.